Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel GMB SHOW. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Contestant Nicola Crawley has spilled the tea on appearing on the ITV game show back in 2023 and claimed production staff only turn on the heaters when host Bradley Walsh turns up. One previous contestant on The Chase has given an insight into what it was like being part of the UK's biggest game show and how not everything was as you would expect. Fertility therapist Nicola Crawley starred on the show in 2023. She excelled in the cash builder round with £8,000, but struggled when she finally faced chaser Paul Sinha and went home without any money. Nicola, 50, explained how being on the set of the ITV show was freezing cold as they were kept in a warehouse. I was surprised that it looked so much like it does on TV, especially because you're basically in a warehouse. It's cold too. I remember thinking it was cold until Bradley Walsh came out and then the heaters came on, she explained. Speaking on behalf of FruitySlots.com, Nicola also said the production team asked all the contestants to bring 5 different outfits, but ironically, it wasn't to keep them warm. Giving a rundown of the filming process and how it was on the day, she said, "The day started around 8 a.m. They put the contestants up in a hotel the night before and picked us up from reception. The producers took us to the green room and started asking us trial questions to get us used to the format. We were told to bring 5 outfits and they inspected them to make sure no one clashed or was wearing anything with a logo or something offensive. We had to do our hair and makeup before, but we got it touched up again. We started filming at 10 a.m. and were done by midday," Nicola added. Nicola also admitted she was left surprised by show host Bradley Walsh, and that he wasn't his rowdy self when cameras were off, but rather quiet. When asked if he's the same off camera, Nicola said, "No, he's quite different when the cameras stop rolling. He's naturally very funny, but between takes, he was just taking calls and drinking coffee. He was quite quiet." Discussing what the application process was like for the ITV show, she continued, "It was lengthy. I applied through ITV's website, but it took 6 months for me to hear back. I got invited to an assessment day in Birmingham where me and some other hopefuls had to play a mock game and answer questions to test our knowledge. I think the producers were looking for different characters and also abilities." The contestants were also warned by production teams to stay off social media following the episode to avoid trolling online. Nicola explained, "Yes, they advised us to stay off social media for a few days after our episode aired. They warned us about trolls and how they can be quite personal. I did look online because I was curious and actually only saw positive comments. I never imagined the highlight of my year would begin with chattering teeth and blue fingertips. When I got the call confirming my spot as a contestant on The Chase, I shrieked loud enough to wake the entire neighborhood. I'd watched the show religiously for years, shouting answers at the TV, cheering on strangers, and secretly believing I could take on any chaser, even the beast. Now, I had my shot. But nobody tells you what really happens before you get to the studio floor. We were told to arrive at 6 a.m. sharp. I expected a swanky ITV studio, or at least a warm, welcoming waiting room with pastries and coffee. Instead, I stepped into what looked like the forgotten corner of an aircraft hangar. It was vast, echoing, and teeth-grindingly cold, like someone had left the doors open all winter. There were no windows, just rows of plastic chairs, a single heater in the corner that hummed louder than it heated, and a long table with tepid tea and packets of custard creams. I looked around at the other contestants: Susan, a retired librarian who knitted through the silence; Liam, a sports fanatic who kept jogging in place to stay warm; and Mia, a schoolteacher from Leeds with eyes as sharp as a hawk's. We huddled together like penguins, making nervous small talk while rubbing our arms for warmth. A production assistant finally arrived, clipboard in hand and scarf wrapped tight. "Sorry about the chill, folks. The heating's a bit temperamental today, but don't worry, it'll warm up soon." That was a lie. Over the next 4 hours, we were shuttled back and forth between makeup, wardrobe, and interviews, all still inside this Arctic warehouse. There was no sign of the actual studio. We were beginning to joke that The Chase was a myth and we were on some bizarre endurance show instead. At one point, Liam whispered, "This is the real final chase, who can survive frostbite before meeting the governess." But finally, just after noon, they took us through a narrow corridor and into a different world. Suddenly, warmth, Lights, a plush studio, the famous chase table. And there, smiling like a mischievous ringleader, stood Bradley Walsh. "All right, team," he grinned. "Heard you've been chilling out backstage, literally." We laughed, partly because he was charming, and partly because we were just relieved to feel our fingers again. The game itself was a blur, exhilarating and intense. I was second up. My cash builder wasn't too shabby, £6,000. I chose the middle offer against Anne Hegarty, the governess. She looked regal, terrifying, and strangely amused by my nervous energy. I made it through by the skin of my teeth. Susan wasn't so lucky. She faltered on a question about Greek mythology and was caught. Liam, hyped on adrenaline and caffeine, took the higher offer and nailed it. Mia, she breezed through like she'd rehearsed for this her whole life. In the final chase, it was me, Liam, and Mia, fighting to protect a total of £25,000. We scored 19 steps, a decent number. But Annie was in rare form. She caught us with 10 seconds to spare. The defeat stung, but as we walked off set, Bradley clapped us on the shoulders. "You gave her a run for her money, and you didn't freeze to death, which is more than I can say for half the crew." We laughed again, but I wasn't quite over it. Later that evening, back in my hotel room, wrapped in a fluffy robe and sipping hot chocolate, I reflected on the whole surreal experience. The freezing warehouse, the nerves, the magic of walking onto that brightly lit set. It was a strange, unforgettable adventure. Would I do it all again? Absolutely. I just bring thermal socks next time. Epilogue. Weeks later, when my episode aired, friends messaged me in disbelief. "You looked so calm. Bradley flirted with you. Is Annie really that scary in person?" But none of them asked about the warehouse. The hours we spent like icicles, waiting for a shot at fame, remained our little secret, until now. So if you're ever selected for the chase, here's a pro tip. Brush up on trivia and pack a hot water bottle. You'll thank me later.